Hey, really quick, stick around till the end of the video for details on a giveaway and a cash prize musical contest for whoever can sample flip the 4 million Sound Good Eyes kick drum best. Okay, thanks, bye, enjoy the video! 2004. A simpler time. Snoop Dogg was dropping stuff like it was hot, Linkin Park was breaking the habit, Eminem was starting his band and just losing it, Hoobastank found a reason, Usher was in the club with his homies Lil Jon and Ludacris, the Black Eyed Peas were just getting started in there, and Britney Spears thought I was toxic. Which, I was in 4th grade, Britney. Of course I was. Have you met 4th graders? And the world of video games was no different.
I'm about kicking ass.
The PS2 would lose some weight and go portable, the Game Boy Advance SP would mutate and grow a second head, World of Warcraft would begin to consume the lives of millions, Half-Life would finally get a full life. Hey, this is why we're actually not getting Half-Life 3. There's 2 halves to a whole that is one whole life, case closed. Pokemon dipped their toes into the idea of remakes, debuting Fire Red and Leaf Green. Paper Mario was opening an old-ass door or something like that. Spider-Man 2 existed. And Metal Gear Solid released the first game in its timeline. Metal Gear Solid 3. The world was ablaze with all different types of media. But whoa. Before you come at me with the pitchforks, trust me, I hear ya. If you're familiar with this year, there's one video game that came out that changed the entire landscape of gaming as a whole. There was a multi-award winning game that every friend and their flippin' grandmammy was playing with all their friends that would take the world by storm. Yep, the game I'm talking about is Donkey Konga. God, Donkey freaking Konga. The only logical next entry into the DK franchise in a post-Donkey Kong 64 world. Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't want to find 3,821 unique collectibles in a single video game? We thought you wanted a still currently unmatched Guinness World Record-breaking level of things to collect in a video game. But no, it's okay. We hear ya. Here you go. Have a happy, slappy, clappy good time, you lazy bag of donkey dicks. And you know what? Just for that, no more Donkey Kong racing. Yeah, lose my number, kid. I'm divorcing your father, but me, your new stepdad, Namco. Growing up, we would go to this half mini golf course, half water park, half laser tag, half go-kart, and bumper boat place every once in a while for birthdays or special occasions. And one of the halves I didn't mention was a giant castle where the entire first floor was an arcade. And man, I loved this place. I had a lot of firsts and fell in love with a lot of games here, like Hydro Thunder, Off-Road Challenge, Air Hockey, and this Stompy Spider game. But this was also where I was introduced to the mystical and magical world of rhythm games. This arcade was the first time I had ever played Dance Dance Revolution, and realized I had no rhythm with my feet. It was the first time I'd played Beat Mania, and realized I had no clue what was going on in front of me, but really liked the music. It was the first time I had ever played whatever this pre-Guitar Hero drum version of Guitar Hero was, and learned you actually need to know how drums work to be able to play it. In a pre-Guitar Hero world, there really wasn't anything accessible for the home console market in terms of rhythm games, unless you were lucky enough to have the NES Fitness version of DDR called Dance Aerobics, and even then, let's face it, were you really lucky to have had that experience?
Let's go!
In the wake of Microsoft having acquired Rareware and your older brother still advising against cyberbullying Microsoft via nonstop emails into giving them back to Nintendo so that we can get a proper Nintendo platform release of Banjo 3, which personally I still think has potential to work, but I guess we'll never know, now will we? My siblings, the Nintendo fanbase, and I anxiously awaited to see what would come from the Congo jungles next. And we wouldn't have to wait long. Donkey Konga banana slammed its way onto the scene in Japan December 12th of 2003, selling 320,000 copies, and on September 27th of 2004 in North America, ultimately shipping about 1.18 million copies throughout its life cycle. And keep in mind, the GameCube sold 21 million units, meaning that about 5% of people who had a GameCube also had this game and a pair of bongos to boot. Donkey Konga ultimately received some pretty mixed reviews, such as the New York Times, who suggested try clapping along to every song on the radio for half an hour to see if it was worth buying in the first place. But arguably my favorite review is the ultra-misogynistic magazine called Maxim, giving it an 8 out of 10, who suggested buying 4 bongo controllers to, quote-unquote, create a frenzied, unholy din suitable for ritual virgin sacrifice, which, to each their own. And sure, the gameplay was revolutionary for its time. Donkey Konga rocked, so games like Guitar Hero and Rock Band could roll. But the storyline, if you could even come close to calling it that, is banana lacking. I mean, Donkey Kong game plots were never really like Game of Thrones level complexity-wise, but like, look at this ape shit. Diddy and Donkey are walking on a beach when they find a mysterious pair of barrels unlike any they'd ever seen before. Never mind they've previously worked with barrels that like warp them across the literal country, or barrels that freeze the fabric of their existence, or whatever you call this. But these barrels are mysterious, but like, whatever. Maybe it's because the top halves are made of human flesh. Well, sure, we'll let that one slide. Diddy is so scared of him, he thinks that it's a trap set by King K. Rool. They take him to Cranky Kong, and Cranky's like, lol, they're bongos. And they're like, bongos? Completely ignoring the fact that DK himself constantly used them all throughout the most recent release within the same franchise. But again, we'll give him a pass on that one too. Maybe this is like a prequel game or something. Cranky's like, this is a legendary bongo, and DK's like, oh, sweet, well, too bad, Legends, I'm calling this the DK bongo now. He starts playing like a chump, and the chimp starts making fun of him. Then Diddy tries to play, and he sucks too. And while clapping his hands in childlike laughter, the bongos begin to glow. And Cranky's like, yep, they do that shit. And DK's like, yeah, boy. Then Donkey's like, oh, we suck. And Cranky informs them, well, yeah, you need to practice. And of course, like any true musician, they both respond with practice. Ugh, I hate practicing. But what if we got big and famous? Then we'd be able to buy anything we want. All the cocaine, all the bananas we can store, all the bananas we can eat. And Cranky is like, bitch, you have to practice. And yeah, that's the literal story. I'm not kidding at all. Like, no going on tour and getting a taste of the fame and throwing it all away over a beautiful girl. No opening up a school of bongos that gets shut down, but gets saved with the raw power of conga line music. Not even like getting mentored into an insanely toxic degree and almost dying in a car crash. Just practice, you dumbasses. Thank Clump I'm not here for the plot, man. Donkey Konga's setlist felt very confused as to who its target demographic was, which was perfect for my eclectic musical taste. Like, I lived with my iPod on shuffle growing up, but even for its time, it felt like half of the setlist was reserved for my musically out-of-touch dad, another half was dedicated towards horny 90s college kids, and the two extra little slivers was one for your infantile little cousin, and the other was for your Hispanic friend's uncle, which, I mean, hey, don't get me wrong, Para los Romperos is arguably one of the best songs on this entire soundtrack. Hell, even further, I wouldn't have discovered some absolutely real earworms, like the impression that I get, the locomotion, and Busy Child. Like, even being a small child at the time, there were a couple of songs that I didn't mind being on there, but they very much felt like they were shoehorned in to appeal to the masses, like We Will Rock You, Whip It, Louie Louie, and so forth. The only song that really spoke to my pop-punk, MTV, and VH1 riddled preteen ears was the Great Value version of All the Small Things by Blink-182. On one hand, you can call this setlist family-friendly balanced, but on the other, it's just throwing a little bit of everything to the wall to see what sticks. Special shout out to Sing 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 with a Swing That Shit Bops. And honestly, anyone I knew who owned the game never owned a second pair of bongos. Mostly because anybody I knew didn't actually own the game in the first place, but you could use a regular controller as the second pair of bongos to play through songs, which I think my little brother and I tried once and promptly decided a second time would not be necessary, mostly because the extent of his musical appreciation went as deep as RuneScape's Sea Shanty 2, which I can't blame him, that song slaps even to this day. Let's go! But especially because notes of the song would get divided between the two players, and with how little notes there already were, it really just wasn't as much fun. But what we did play until we got burnt out was the mini-games that you had to buy through the currency earned by playing normal songs, of which there were 3 to play. There was a vine climbing one that you had to collect fruits in while dodging claptraps and zingers, which didn't punish you anyway if that did happen, and it moved like molasses, so it's definitely bottom tier. There was a whack-a-mole clone with 3 holes, one for each side of the bongos and a clap for the middle one, where King K. Rool does this, which since your mallet has a cooldown timer means if your reflexes were too fast, you would miss the hit and then watch him pop up in a different spot and disappear, so you end up in a loop of playing catch-up trying to get a single hit on King K. Rool, who is like, I'm gonna head out. And then there was the one that my brother and I spent hours grinding on, this banana juggling game. And if it weren't for the insanely awful soundtrack behind this mini game, it would probably have been longer. Pretty much you pass a banana from left hand to right hand by pressing the left and then the right bongo respectively, and at any time during the game you can clap to add another banana. With each successful juggle, it adds a point to your counter, and then at the end of the game, if you missed any, then it would drop it from your total tally. We used to take turns playing this game, seeing who could juggle the most. I got up to 78 when trying it for the first time in years, but I have faith that a plus 100 score is entirely possible. But I mean, that was really it. There was a second mode for each difficulty called the Jam modes, which expected you to memorize each note, which even by Guitar Hero standards, that's a bit much. And ultimately didn't matter too much because hitting both bongos at the same time would register as a successful hit, so all you really needed to do is memorize where the claps were. There was a challenge mode as well that just shuffles the songs and gives you a full health bar that slowly drains as you miss notes, but then refills a little bit after each song, with the goal being trying to see how many songs you can complete consecutively. Given that the major selling point of this was the bongos, the game stood on its own 2 feet, but it simultaneously left a lot to be desired. They really should have added more mini-games and had like a Mario Party style mode or something. While the controller technically worked for other games, you couldn't really expect to become the next Melee world champion with it. Sorry, Axe. Anybody who actually had it wondered what in the world could possibly come next for this controller. And believe me when I say it did not take them long for them to get their greasy monkey paws to drum up a sequel. Donkey Konga 2 released on July 1st of 2004 in Japan, only 6 months after the first entry and even 2 months before North America even got the first Donkey Konga. It took the US 10 months after the first game to see Donkey Konga 2 come out on May 9th of 2005, and in my opinion had a way better soundtrack, but ultimately was a less fun game overall. And oh, don't worry, just in case you were feeling dissatisfied from the storyline of the first game, if you wait on the main screen after booting up, there's more Donkey Konga PowerPoint style lore for you to eat up. The soundtrack really laid it on thick with my early childhood angst, throwing in 2 songs from both Incubus and from Good Charlotte, who even did a commercial promoting the game.
Let's do this.
Send the Pain Below by Chevelle, Headstrong by Trapped, you know, when they actually still had a fan base, and my personal favorite in the whole series of Donkey Konga, Pieces by Hoobastank. I used to play this song over and over again until I got it right, which I'm sure sounded like this from my parents' back room. Sorry about that one, Mom. Some other noteworthy songs are Born Too Slow, Boombastic, and Come Clean, which is an arguable bop to this day. At me about it. My personal hype for a Donkey Konga sequel as a child was high, but in retrospect, it really only delivered on the front of songs to play and not much else. The minigames not only dropped in number, but also dropped severely in quality. Like, take a look. The only one remotely worth its potassium is this rapid-fire bongo challenge that sends down multiple sets of inputs for you to race against a friend or a computer, but this was literally it. The only other minigame was a memorization game, kind of similar to the jam mode from the first one, that forces you to listen to the same 9-second segment of a song intro, and this song is the worst. It's the worst. Awkwardly shift to silence. Go! And then hit the notes without any indicators on them. It is insanely underwhelming. I mean, having icons was cool, and oh wait, that was literally the only other feature that got added to this game. And yeah, this was a technical upgrade, but it was a spiritual downgrade overall for the game series, and it's probably why there wasn't a Donkey Konga 3 in the US. So not to drag on about this, but Donkey Konga 3 did exist in Japan, and yeah, it looks exactly like Donkey Konga 2. There's really not much different. But something I did want to note real quick was how much better the soundtracks for the Japanese versions of all 3 games were. Japanese Donkey Konga had Ai no Uta from Pikmin, Mambo No. 5, the Starfy theme, a random Japanese exclusive Spanish song called Mas que Nada, a ton of random Japanese TV shows and anime themes like Hamtaro, Doraemon, Power Rangers, Detective Conan, even a song from Utada Hikaru. Donkey Konga 2 had a ton of J-pop I'm entirely unfamiliar with, themes from Naruto, Gundam Seed, and plenty of other anime, the theme from Pikmin 2 for this one, and more. Like, okay, this one wasn't as stacked, but Donkey Konga 3 had another Naruto opening theme, the Full Metal Alchemist opening theme, another Mobile Gundam theme, a Dragon Ball Z song, a Puffy Amiyumi song, an actual jazz song, the Super Smash Bros. Melee theme, Mona's Pizza from the WarioWare series, a song from Star Fox's Soul, the Fire Emblem song, and an entire slew of 8-bit music from NES and arcade games. And one of my favorite video game songs of all time, the Katamari Damacy theme. And yeah, we got Timu Incubus. Again, being almost a literal clone of Donkey Konga 2, I swear by the banana bird that the Japanese setlist just had a better sense of swag that the US games really dropped the barrel on. But Nintendo couldn't give up on the bongos just yet. Realistically, the best bongo experience was literally right around the corner. And while the Konga games were Well, they certainly existed, that's for sure. But with 3 under Nintendo's belt and interest fizzling out, it looked like the end for the controller. And then, completely unprompted, straight out of the monkey minds, came the total wild card that is Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Essentially, it's a side-scrolling platforming game, but with arcade elements to really bring the experience together. Pressing the right bongo moves you right, pressing the left one moves you left, but here's where they got really clever with the bongos. If you press both at the same time, DK jumps. And then clapping is how he collects bananas, interacts with objects, or stuns enemies. This is all interwoven with an extremely addictive combo system, where any consecutive tricks done without touching the ground level up your combo by 1, but then any bananas you collect are multiplied by your combo multiplier. What this results in is a game that feels like half Mario, half Tony Hawk, half parkour, and half Street Fighter, and there really hasn't been anything quite like it since. There's 4 pages of 4 kingdoms each with a 5th secret one, and 2 levels and a boss fight in each one, and at the end of the levels there's a section where you have a short window to enter in as many inputs as you can for a quick bonus, with the real goal being to get a high enough score to earn up to 4 medals per level, which then unlocks more kingdoms to play. It's simple, effective, and fairly unique, which I sincerely believe allows it to stand up to this day. And man, if it wasn't so immensely exhausting to play, I would probably pick this up as a game to either speedrun or get high scores on, because it's actually insane how well this game is designed. And notice how I didn't say the characters. Like, sure, there's a lot of great individual buddies and enemies, and the areas look just as great. And keep in mind, this was the first entry into the awkward post-Rareware DK Nintendo game era, so there were no Kremlings or Kong family members in sight. But okay, like, who approved of these designs? Karate Kong? Sumo Kong? Ninja Kong? Dread Kong? We're going there? And then, of course, giant bird and mecha pineapple grenade triple bypass heart attack elephant Gundam robot. Okay, not gonna lie, that one's actually pretty cool. And like, I can generally let that slide, but who do you think the penultimate final bad guy is? Well, if you guessed anything other than a cactus, you're wrong. Yeah, meet Cactus King, who after you beat the secret 5th level becomes the Ghastly King, or Final Kong in Japanese. God, that sounds so much cooler. But they're both essentially the same person. Monkey? And yeah, I'll admit, in isolation, this character design is kinda badass. It just really feels like they wanted this fight to be with King K. Rool. Listen, like, all I'm saying is that a modding community for this game would go hard as hell. But as I grew up and eventually became a real drummer in a real band, I never forgot my roots. I know without the various rhythm games I've played throughout my life, I wouldn't have an innate sense for rhythm and drums and music. Specifically, I wouldn't have spent 20 years drumming on everything within my active vicinity. Pillows, desks, people, but most importantly, my legs. See, if it weren't for Donkey Konga, I wouldn't have learned how to do this completely useless drumming technique, which then later gave me the foundation to understand some core basics of metal drumming. But I also found it severely tragic that I could never actually bridge that gap and use the bongos as an actual instrument. So I decided I would fix that and make the first pair of bongo controllers that work as an actual instrument. Oh god, this one's gonna hurt. So yeah, somehow, I managed to come across a brand spanking new set of bongo controllers, complete in box, for only $25 plus shipping and handling. These looked completely unused. Like, look at how pristine the human flesh is. You know, compared to the other options that were available. Yeesh. My goal was to take them apart, give them a fresh coat of paint, install some electronics, program the microprocessor, and then make it operate as a MIDI instrument that I can plug in and use in FL Studio. Simple enough, right? Well, to be blunt, it wasn't. First off, we had to disassemble the bongos. Since Nintendo generally doesn't want you opening up their products, they made them with this super bizarre screw shape called a game bit, to which I had to purchase this game bit screwdriver so that I could take them apart. And yeah, here's where we hit the first problem. The handle of the screwdriver was too big, so I wasn't able to get the bit far enough into the holes to actually reach the screws at the bottom, and it would just kind of spin endlessly. Thankfully though, I was able to just take the bit out of the plastic handle and fit it into an actual drill, which honestly made my life much easier in the long run. So I unscrewed it all and voila, the inside of the DK bongos. It's kind of crazy that it's mostly just hollow, but in all reality, most of the action takes place in the part that you hid. I unscrewed the PCB from the housing, unplugged the microphone, and pulled out this foam cover for the microphone that literally disintegrates if you look at it the wrong way, and then the tops of the bongos actually just slide right out. The last thing we need to do is to remove the gray lining from the outside of the bongo, because I want to keep those unpainted. And let me tell you, this was one of the most nerve-wracking parts. Essentially, you have to move these little tabs of alternating directions slightly out of the housing, but not too far, or else the whole thing would likely just snap apart since they're so damn fragile. And they were such a pain to maneuver. I got the hang of it as I went along and ended up with an almost completely stripped pair of bongos. The last part to consider was the DK sticker on the front, and like I said earlier, this was a brand new controller, so the sticker on the front was absolutely pristine. Not a single scratch of damage on this bad boy, and I intended to keep it that way. I used my heat gun to warm up the glue on the back of the sticker, slid my X-Acto knife underneath it, and put it on a Magic the Gathering treasure token for safekeeping, because let's be real, this thing is goddamn treasure itself. And finally, truly naked bongos. Wait, I know I could phrase that better. Let me try that one more time. I followed this tutorial for painting game controllers and figured it wouldn't be too bad. I needed to start by removing the factory clear coat that was already on them, and the internet swore by using gray Scotch-Brite pads to get the job done. So I started on one side, thinking it wouldn't take much, but I also didn't really know how deep I needed to go. And after about 15 minutes and realizing I'm just barely making a dent, it was clear that this was going to take much longer than I initially thought. So I rubbed and rubbed and rubbed and kept rubbing for like 45 minutes until I had finally rubbed one out, or I guess more like half of one out. I had continued until I'd rubbed out one full bongo clear coat as outlined by the official standards set by the CDC, and now that my room has enough microplastics to put my balls out of commission eternally, it was time to move on to the painting. I initially couldn't decide between sparkly jade and gold, but the jade spray paint that I found consistently had awful reviews, so I opted to make them gold as an homage to the golden bananas and Rareware's general love for golden collectibles. After watching this video from Emily the engineer and seeing how she used 2K automotive clear coating on their SpongeBob cockroach statue, I was completely enamored by the result, but ultimately wasn't super thrilled with the precautions necessary to use it safely, so I just opted for a normal clear coat. We have an adhesion promoter that helps the base coat stick to the plastic of the controller. We have the base coat that helps provide a consistent color for the gold paint. We have the actual gold spray paint itself, which kind of has this undertone of greenish sickliness. I kind of wish I used gold flake instead, but hindsight is 2020. And then lastly, we have the clear coat that protects the gold paint. I did 2 coats of each and let them dry for 45 minutes in between each layer, which ultimately took all day to get moving along. And as I finished the final layer, I realized I completely forgot to do the start button. Lol. So after haphazardly speedrunning it, now we have a fully customized, one-of-a-kind golden DK bongo controller. Like the gold may be a little bit more flat than what I was hoping for, and part of me wished that I had opted for a more colorful result, but I mean, hey, the child in me was utterly enthused by the result, and that's who I'm doing this for at the end of the day anyways. But now here's where this gets a little tricky. I took apart the mechanical chesticles of the bongos that revealed the actual mechanism, which actually showed me something kind of interesting. See, if you take a look here, there's 4 different contacts for the bongos, which is a big part of how it can be used for other games successfully. Each one of these individual halves register as their own button. However, the thing is, I have to use my own Arduino microprocessor board to make this happen, and while the bongos use sensors to recognize when a button is being pressed, I had to opt for a different solution. These are called piezo electronic sensors, and honestly, they're kind of a pain in the ass. They work by converting pressure into electrical voltage, so the harder you hit it, the higher the voltage output will be. I figured this would be perfect so that I could hit the bongo with a softer strong hit and equivalently have a softer strong output, where the electronics in the bongos already would only allow for a full hit with no variance of velocity in between. So I took out the electronics and realized I did not think this through. Like, the sensors were flat enough to where I could just throw them in there and run the wires through the holes, and that wouldn't be an issue. But now there was no even distribution of pressure to the sensors, and because these little guys are so sensitive, even a minor gap was enough to make consistent results damn near impossible. But while I didn't expect this to be the specific hurdle I'd get stuck on, I did anticipate the solution, and they were these stupidly expensive cones of foam. But like, trust me, I did my research, and just using normal foam wasn't gonna cut it here, specifically because these particular cones cones were made from a super dense foam. But basically, the sensor goes at the bottom of the foam, and the tip of the foam presses against the bottom of the head of the drum. So when you hit the drum, the vibrations focus on the point that the cone is on and transit that pressure from the drum head to the sensor equally. The problem was the cones were too big. I also couldn't find my scissors, so I just X-Acto bladed them. And I can confirm the result was not pretty. I didn't even adhere them to the bottom of the heads. I just shoved the thing in there, ran the wiring, and called it a day. Except these sensors were so damn cheap that essentially, if you so much as slightly offended them, their cables would just rip out. Then I had to strip a new sensor wire, strip a copper wire, wrap them together, solder the wires together, heat shrink them together, and then pray to King Inca Dinka Doo that they don't fall apart again, which took like 3 different times. But after a handful of hours, I got the sensors hooked up and in the bongo, and then got them successfully plugged into the breadboard. And this is probably where I should have thought just a little further ahead, and either bought like a PCB to solder these components into appropriately, or even like a smaller breadboard. But that was not in the budget. So I just kind of left it all outside of the bongos. And then it was time for the most important part. The sticker. Yeah, I f***ed it up. I don't even remember how it happened, but I accidentally creased it with my fingernail, and now there's this gash on the previously pristine sticker. And I'll have you know, I only cried for 20 minutes before moving on to the next part. I then routed those into a spare Arduino Uno that I had from past projects, and set up a quick program to test and make sure they were being read, which let me tell you, seeing something as simple as a sensor, sensing, and then telling a microprocessor that it was indeed sensing pressure feels absolutely magical. The goal from here was to make a new program that would then convert these electrical signals into MIDI data that could then be read by FL Studio or other DAWs. And here's the part where I need to level with you. While I've had previous experience programming microprocessors, I haven't done it for about 13 years. I even made this simple dog food timer reminder as a practice project to prepare for this one, but what was needed to make this project work was way beyond my scope. And because I was on a contract break from my job and severely over what little budget I could allocate to this project, I couldn't feasibly hire an engineer for $75 an hour to write and debug it for me when I was barely making $15 an hour on temporary unemployment myself. Nope. All this to say, I used ChatGPT to write the code, which boy do I have a story for you in regard to why that was a bad idea, but I wanted to be transparent and honest with you guys because ultimately I understand the sentiment around that. I just wanted to make the little dream that small child Morgan had a long time ago a reality. In the future, I would love to hire people to actually do this. If you're interested, feel free to hit me up. So yes, the concept was fairly basic. Like, it's really not hard to look up the documentation for the Arduino and tell it to read the voltage on a particular input, but there were 2 parts that were beyond my scope. How to convert the signal from the sensor into MIDI data, and how to convince FL Studio to recognize the bongos as a valid instrument. We're able to convert the hitting of the bongo into a voltage that can be read by the microprocessor, which basically converts an abstract voltage like 5 volts into a number between 1 and 1024. What this code does is converts that digital number into 3 individual messages that MIDI data requires to operate. Whether a note is being pressed or not, what note is being pressed, and how hard the drum was hit, which the piezo sensor gives us the number we need to generate the velocity, and the code inherently designates each sensor to a specific node, so those are easy. Ironically, the hardest part was determining what a hit was, but let's put a pin in that. The problem is, while the message the microprocessor sends has the data MIDI messages use, it's not in a MIDI data format. At this point, it's using a universal protocol for sending individual bits of data, either a 1 or a 0, basically converting words and numbers into binary pulses of electricity. However, FL Studio doesn't look for a serial kind of data like that. It specifically needs MIDI data. And this is why the next step is to send this data to a program called Hairless MIDI. Let's use a metaphor. Imagine you have a cat, right? Let's say it wants to make music, but it doesn't know anything other than how to meow a tune. Introduce Bongo Cat, or Hairless MIDI in this case. Think of him as the producer in the studio. Your cat goes to Bongo Cat and says, hey, I want a song that sounds like this. Your cat has no idea what key, what BPM, or what time signature it just sang that tune in, even though it still inherently performed all those individual aspects within their hummed melody. However, Bongo Cat is smart, and he does. Bongo Cat then transcribes your cat's melody perfectly onto staff paper, which can then be given to the cat doctor to perform the melody with their orchestra. In this metaphor, your cat is the Arduino Arduino speaking in serial data. BongoCat is the serial to MIDI bridge, and the orchestra is FL Studio. The problem is, BongoCat has stage fright. Oh, poor little guy. And doesn't know how to direct a room of musicians to play. He only knows the music theory. But he needs someone who can actually take that information and then conduct other musicians to play that music. This is the last piece of the puzzle, and why we have the cat ductor in the first place. In literal terms, even though the serial data from the microprocessor is now in a MIDI format, the data cannot be recognized by a DAW until it's being delivered by something the computer recognizes as a proper MIDI device. This is where we use a program called Loop MIDI that lets you create a digital MIDI instrument, which then appears inside of FL Studio's MIDI options as a valid instrument. That is our cat ductor. So after connecting the electronics inside the bongo to the Arduino, plugging it into my computer, uploading the code, testing various other programs that just didn't work before I landed on hairless MIDI and loop MIDI, I kept getting this error for like 3 f***ing hours straight of troubleshooting. Remember how I said using AI to generate the code was a problem? Well, here's why. The baud rate. The baud rate, which is simply the rate at which data is being transferred, was mismatched. Essentially, the microprocessor was sending data too fast for hairless MIDI to even process, which would throw the error. I asked ChatGPT to review the code so many times, and one of the first steps it kept recommending was to check the baud rate, which I would tell it what the value needed to be, and it would respond by telling me that it was already set to that. It would try to fix it, and the same error would persist, and it was so damn confident that it was getting it right. Then I decided to just check the code for myself, and it was literally using a different rate than what it claimed to be. I went to the code, typed it in manually, and then it just magically worked. So yeah, this is a precautionary tale. Learn how to read the code, always double check it. So now we have the bongos talking to the sensors, talking to the microprocessor, talking to Windows, talking to the serial to MIDI bridge, talking to the virtual MIDI instrument, and voila, finally talking to FL Studio. I set up FPC with a couple of sounds and it sounded like this. What the f***? So I switched over to just reading the actual data coming in from the sensors, and I noticed something which I wish I had researched more in depth before going down this rabbit hole. See, if you press a piezo electronic sensor lightly, it detects way too many presses because it's so sensitive that it will pick up vibrations outside of the initial hit and cause just enough voltage detection to trigger another press. And simultaneously, in the opposite direction, if you press the sensor too many times in rapid succession, the voltage constantly reads high inputs, not allowing the voltage spike to return to baseline and prevents any further hits from registering correctly. This problem seemed to be an inherent part of using these sensors, and I thought that we were just out of luck on this one, and that I'd have to switch to a proper drum trigger, which was certainly out of the budget, until I started thinking about it more. I updated the code so that it would recognize 2 potentiometers, or knobs, and made it so that each knob controlled its sensitivity, which allowed me to make micro adjustments while it was live instead of rewriting the code, uploading it, resetting the connection, then trying again, but it was still just recognizing too many hits. This is where I asked ChatGPT for any other solutions before I switched over, and it recommended adding a block of code for something called debouncing, which is simply adding a microscopic delay before registering another hit. While this result wasn't perfect, this cleaned up a vast majority of the unintended hits. I then assigned this to the second potentiometer knob and let the first one control the velocity threshold for both drums, and it worked really well, but it still wasn't perfect. There was a final bit of code it suggested implementing that basically measured the last time a drum was hit quickly, and if it's within a certain amount of milliseconds, it lowers the threshold automatically, so that when the sensors are stuck at a higher voltage, it adjusts the code to read hits even when the spike wasn't returning to baseline. And then finally, after way more tinkering than I legitimately cared for, it finally all came together. It was playable, it was generally pretty responsive, and all with minimal latency. The golden MIDI DK bongos had come to their final form. Like, sure, if you hit it too hard on one side, it may trigger the other side as well, but that's kind of expected using piezo sensors, and this is way further beyond my expectations for how I thought this would have turned out in the first place, so I'm beyond content with this result. If you ever wanted to record digital bongos, this couldn't be more efficient. if you ever wanted to dial in a kick snare loop, it's actually perfect for that too. And if you ever felt the pressing urge to cover Super Mario Sunshine's Delfino Plaza, I mean, technically you can do that, but I'm definitely not the best representation of whether or not you should do that. But yeah, that's essentially the gist of it. I've since decided that if we ever hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel, I'll host a giveaway and send the golden bongos to one of you, free of charge. So I mean, banana slam that subscribe button, like the video, and tell me what you'd like to see from me next. I really want to try to make some shorter format videos moving forward, but also still do some of the occasional longer ones like this. And also, I'm holding a contest on my Discord server for anyone who could take the sample of the 4 million sound goodized kick drum from my biggest video and sample flip it into a song and genre of your choice. The deadline is December 30th, 2026, and the first place prize is $250, with second and third place prizes as well, and the winner will be decided by community voting. So for more details, join my server via the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.